When I was growing up, I always felt like the shadow in my own family. My father adored my sister, Alina. To him, she was everything: responsible, hardworking, ambitious, and the pride of the family. Every time someone visited our home, he would sing her praises. My daughter Alina just got promoted. Alina manages everything on her own. She doesn't need anyone's help. And then his eyes would land on me with that familiar look of disappointment. I was the younger one, the one who struggled to keep up, the one who always needed guidance. My grades were decent but never excellent, my choices never impressed him, and my attempts at being independent always ended with his criticism. One evening, I overheard him talking to my mother in the living room. His words cut deeper than a knife. "Your sister is successful and responsible, unlike you. She doesn't need help. But you'll always be a burden," he said, not realizing I was standing by the door. I froze. My chest tightened and my throat burned. A burden, that was how my own father saw me. I wanted to cry, to scream, to run away, but I didn't. Instead, I quietly walked back to my room and stared at the ceiling for hours. His words kept echoing in my mind, crushing whatever little confidence I had left. From that day, I started distancing myself from my father. I would avoid conversations, eat quickly, and retreat to my room. My mother noticed, of course. She tried to comfort me, saying, "Beta, your father doesn't mean it like that. He just has high expectations." But I knew the truth to him: I was a failure. Meanwhile, Alina's life looked perfect. She had a good job in a corporate firm, a car, her own apartment, and friends who admired her. Everyone looked at her with respect. At family gatherings, relatives compared me to her openly, saying things like, "Why don't you learn from your sister?" Or, "Alina is such a role model." I smiled on the outside, but inside, I was breaking. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a rainy evening, and my father received a call. His face turned pale, and he rushed out of the house. My mother followed him. I didn't know what was happening, but after an hour, I got the news Alina had been in a terrible car accident. My heart dropped. My perfect sister, the one everyone admired, was now lying in a hospital bed between life and death. I rushed to the hospital and saw her unconscious, hooked up to machines. My father sat in the corner, his head buried in his hands, looking completely broken. For the first time, I saw him cry. I stood there, my emotions tangled. Part of me wanted to scream at him, "See, even she needs help now." But another part of me just felt deep sorrow. She was my sister. Despite everything, I loved her. And that was the moment I decided I would step up. The smell of antiseptic filled the hospital corridors. The constant beeping of machines echoed in my ears. And the sight of my sister lying there, helpless, shook me to the core. Alina had always been strong, confident, and unshakable, but now she looked fragile, like a child who needed protection. The doctors explained that her injuries were serious. She had broken ribs, a fractured leg, and a head injury. She would survive, but recovery would be long, painful, and exhausting. My father sat silently, nodding at every word, but I could see the panic in his eyes. He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared to see his perfect daughter in such a vulnerable state. That night, when everyone left for a short rest, I stayed behind in the hospital room. I sat beside Alina's bed, holding her cold hand. For the first time, I saw her differently. Not as the golden child, not as the favorite, but as my sister. My blood, my family. Tears rolled down my face as I whispered, "You don't have to be strong all the time, Alina. It's my turn now. I'll be here for you." The next morning, my father returned. His eyes were swollen from crying, but when he saw me sitting there, feeding Alina soup with shaky hands, something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe even a little guilt. "Go rest," he said quietly. "You don't have to stay here all night." But I shook my head. "I want to be here. She needs me." A days turned into weeks. I became Alina's shadow. I helped her sit up, walk with crutches, do her exercises. I changed her bandages when my mother couldn't. I handled the endless hospital paperwork when my father felt overwhelmed. Slowly, I noticed something changing in my father's behavior. He started watching me differently, not with disappointment, but with a strange kind of respect. He didn't say it, but I could feel it. One evening, while Alina was asleep, my father sat beside me in the waiting room. For a long time, he said nothing. Then finally, he broke the silence. "You know," he said slowly, "I always thought you weren't strong enough. I thought you couldn't handle responsibility. But these past weeks you've proved me wrong. I froze. My heart pounded. These were the words I had been dying to hear all my life. But instead of anger or resentment, I felt something else, relief. I'm not perfect like Alina, I said softly. But I'm not weak either. I just needed a chance. He nodded, his eyes filled with regret. I see that now. For the first time. My father looked at me not as the failure, not as the disappointment, but as his child. Someone capable, someone who mattered. But the journey wasn't over. Alina's recovery was difficult. There were nights she cried in frustration, screaming that she hated being dependent on others. She would say, "I'm supposed to be the strong one. Why is this happening to me?" And I would sit beside her, reminding her that strength wasn't about never falling. It was about rising after the fall. Slowly, my sister began to heal, not just physically but emotionally too. And in that process, something beautiful happened between us. We grew closer. For the first time, she admitted that she had always envied me. "Everyone thinks I have it all together," she whispered one night. "But do you know how exhausting it is to live up to everyone's expectations? To always be perfect. You're braver than me because you were never afraid to be yourself." Her words stunned me. All my life I thought she was the lucky one, the chosen one. But here she was, confessing that my freedom, the freedom to fail, to stumble, to just be human, was something she wished she had. That night, I realized something important: we had both been prisoners. She was trapped in perfection. I was trapped in comparison. And maybe this accident was the universe's way of breaking those chains. But just when things started to settle, another storm was waiting for us. Alina's recovery was moving forward, but the medical bills were piling up like mountains. Our savings were almost gone, and my father's proud, stubborn nature refused to ask for help from anyone in the extended family. He had always wanted to be seen as strong and independent, but now reality was pressing down hard. One evening, I overheard my parents whispering in the kitchen. "The bills are too much," my mother said with worry in her voice. "We can't manage this on just your salary." "I know," my father replied, sounding defeated. "But what choice do we have? I can't let anyone know we're struggling." I stepped back quietly, my heart racing. For the first time, I saw my father not as the man who always judged me, but as a human being who was drowning in pressure. And in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I had been working part-time at a small cafe before the accident. A job my father never respected. "It's not a career," he would say. "It's just wasting time." But that cafe had taught me something important: how to deal with people, how to earn with dignity, and how to survive on my own. So I took a bold step. I went to my manager and asked for extra shifts. I began working day and night, balancing hospital visits with late-night cafe hours. It was exhausting, but I refused to give up. Every rupee I earned, I put into Alina's medical expenses. When I handed my father the first bundle of money, he stared at me as if he didn't recognize me. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "I earned it," I said firmly. "I can help, Dad. I'm not useless." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. There was no lecture, no criticism, just quiet acceptance. Weeks turned into months, and Alina's strength began to return. She started walking again with the help of a cane. The doctors said she would eventually heal completely. Watching her progress filled me with joy, but deep down, I also felt something else: pride. Not just in her, but in myself. For the first time, I felt like I had a purpose. But life, as always, wasn't done testing us. One day, my father's company announced massive layoffs. After decades of working there, my father lost his job. The man who had once boasted about his success, who had always stood tall with pride, now sat at home defeated, staring blankly at the walls. The atmosphere in our home grew heavier. My father stopped talking much, Alina was still recovering, and my mother silently worried about how we would survive. This time, I didn't wait for someone else to take the lead. "Dad," I said one evening, sitting beside him, "I know this is hard. But maybe it's my turn to step up. Maybe it's time for me to carry some of the weight." He looked at me, his eyes filled with shame. "I failed you all. I can't even provide for my own family anymore." I shook my head. "You didn't fail us. You've always carried everything on your shoulders. Now it's just time to share the load." It wasn't easy, but I started looking for bigger opportunities. I used the experience I gained from the cafe to apply for a job in event management. I poured my heart into the interview, and to my surprise, I got the position. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well and gave me room to grow. The day I brought home my first official paycheck, my father's eyes welled up. He didn't say much, but the way he placed his hand on my shoulder told me more than words ever could. That simple gesture felt like the recognition I had craved my entire life. But the biggest turning point came a few months later, when Alina, finally strong enough to walk on her own again, gathered us all in the living room. "I need to say something," she began, her voice trembling. "All my life, I thought I had to be perfect, and I thought being the responsible one made me better. But when I fell, when I truly needed help, it wasn't my strength that saved me. It was you." She looked at me, tears shining in her eyes. "You showed me what real strength looks like." The room was silent. My mother sniffled softly, and my father just sat there, staring at me with an expression I had never seen before, pride mixed with guilt and love. Finally, he spoke. "I was wrong about you. All those years I compared you to your sister, I judged you harshly. I couldn't see who you really were. But now I see you. And I'm proud of the person you've become." His words hit me like a tidal wave. For years, I had carried the weight of being the lesser child, but in that moment, that burden lifted. I wasn't the shadow anymore. I wasn't the failure. I was me, strong, capable, and worthy of love. But just as life seemed to find balance again, something happened that would test us all one last time. Life has a strange way of teaching lessons. Just when we think the storm has passed, another wave comes crashing in to test how much we've truly grown. For us, that final test came unexpectedly. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. A man in a formal suit stood outside holding a file. He introduced himself as a representative of the bank. My father, it turned out, had taken a personal loan years ago to help Alina set up her apartment, and because he lost his job, he had missed several payments. The man's words were clear: if the debt wasn't settled soon, the bank would take legal action. My father sat down at the table, his head in his hands. The shame on his face was unbearable. "I can't believe I've brought us to this point," he whispered. But this time none of us let him carry the burden alone. "Dad," I said firmly, "we're in this together. You don't have to face it alone anymore." Alina, still limping slightly but stronger than ever, added, "You carried us all your life. Now let us carry you." And that's what we did. I worked overtime. Alina returned to her job part-time as her health allowed, and my mother even started selling homemade snacks in the neighborhood. Slowly but surely, we began paying off the debt. It wasn't easy. Some nights we barely slept. Some days we barely ate. But for the first time in our lives, we were united. Not as a family divided by comparison, but as a family bound by resilience. Through it all, something in my father changed. The man who once valued perfection and success above all else now began to notice the little things. My mother's quiet strength, Alina's vulnerability, my persistence. He stopped comparing, stopped criticizing, and started appreciating. One night, after we had made our final loan payment, my father gathered us all in the living room. His voice shook with emotion as he spoke. "I spent so many years blinded by pride. I thought success meant never needing anyone's help. I thought responsibility meant being flawless. I compared my children because I was too foolish to see that each of you had your own kind of strength. Alina, your ambition inspired me. But you," he turned to me, his eyes soft, "you taught me what real strength is. Not the kind that shines when everything is perfect, but the kind that stands tall when everything is falling apart." A tear welled in my eyes. For so long I had wanted him to see me, to value me. And now, here he was, admitting his mistakes, opening his heart in a way I never thought possible. Alina smiled at me through her tears. "You saved us," she whispered. But I shook my head. We saved each other. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything that had happened. The words my father once said, "Your sister is successful and responsible unlike you, she doesn't need help," no longer haunted me. Instead, they reminded me of how far I had come. I had proven, not just to him but to myself, that I was capable. That I had value, that I was not a shadow but a light in my own way. The accident, the struggles, the debt, They had all been painful trials. But they had also been blessings in disguise. Because without them, we might never have seen each other clearly. My father might never have let go of his pride. My sister might never have broken free from the burden of perfection. And I might never have discovered my own strength. In the end, it wasn't about who was more successful or more responsible. It was about standing together when it mattered most. It was about love, resilience, and family. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all was this: sometimes the person you least expect to rise, the one everyone doubts, is the one who carries the family through the storm. I wasn't my sister. I wasn't the golden child. But I was me, and that was enough.